It's the kind of scene that makes your breath catch. A dimly lit restaurant, a round of laughter, then a sudden shift in the air, like someone turned down the oxygen. Tommy DeVito, played by Joe Pesci, leans in close to Henry Hill. "Funny how?" he says. "Funny like I'm a clown. I amuse you." Everyone remembers that scene, but almost no one realizes it wasn't in the script, not the way it played. Joe Pesci had lived it. Years before he was ever in front of a camera, Pesci was a kid working in a New York restaurant when he accidentally told a maid man he was funny. What followed scared him to his bones, and it stayed with him. Years later, he shared that real-life moment with Scorsese, and Scorsese, always the alchemist, told him, "We're putting it in the movie. No script, no rehearsal, just instinct." That infamous scene was improvised in real time, with Ray Liotta's visible discomfort as raw and real as Henry Hill's. That's what Goodfellas was built on. Truth buried in fiction, actors channeling the lives of real men who killed, stole, snorted, and suffered. But behind all the awards, the legendary lines, and the swagger of a gangster masterpiece, there are still stories, real stories, that most fans never figured out. Because the truth is, the cast of Goodfellas didn't just act, they lived pieces of it. They snuck pieces of themselves into every twitch, every look, every line that never made it to the page. And once you hear what they revealed, you'll never watch the film the same way again. The background setup. By the time Goodfellas hit theaters in 1990, the gangster film was already a well-worn genre, one filled with guns, suits, blood, and bravado. But Martin Scorsese wasn't interested in just making another mob movie. He was telling the story of how it felt to be inside that world, to fall in love with the adrenaline, the money, the power, and then to lose everything, piece by piece, based on the real-life account of mob associate Henry Hill, as told in Nicholas Pileggi's Wise Guy. Goodfellas was raw, fast, and electric. It didn't romanticize crime. It immersed you in it, made you taste it, feel the paranoia, the addiction, the rush. The cast was seemingly perfect. Ray Liotta, the pretty-eyed outsider with a nervous edge, played Henry Hill. Robert De Niro, ice-cold and calculating, took on Jimmy Conway. And Joe Pesci, a short fuse of chaotic energy, became Tommy DeVito. Lorraine Bracco, with equal parts sensuality and steel, played Karen Hill, Henry's wife, the lone female voice in a sea of men. These are the names everyone knows. These are the performances that shaped an era. And for over 30 years, fans have obsessed over their scenes, their quotes, their swagger. But what most don't realize is how much was nearly different, and how much of what made it unforgettable came not from the script, but from what the actors themselves brought to it. Because behind every casting decision, behind every smirk or sudden outburst was a deeper truth. A gamble, a personal memory, or, in some cases, a secret. Casting surprises. It's hard to imagine anyone else playing Henry Hill. Ray Liotta's haunted charm, his quiet unraveling, it's become inseparable from the film's identity. But here's the thing most fans never knew. He almost didn't get the part. At the time, Liotta wasn't a household name. He had just come off a dark, impressive turn in Something Wild, but studio heads weren't convinced. They wanted a bigger star. Tom Cruise's name floated. So did Sean Penn's. Scorsese even briefly considered Al Pacino for Jimmy Conway, though Pacino, weary of gangster roles, turned it down. He would later admit to regretting that decision, but Scorsese had a different vision. He didn't want stars who brought baggage. He wanted actors who could disappear into the world, not overshadow it. And De Niro, already cast as Jimmy, agreed. When Ray Liotta approached him at the Venice Film Festival to make his case, he didn't beg or audition. He simply was Henry Hill, nervous, persistent, slightly dangerous, and De Niro saw it. That meeting, quiet and off the books, sealed it. Then there was Joe Pesci, who wasn't even supposed to be in the running. Pesci had worked with Scorsese before, in Raging Bull. But by 1990, he'd largely stepped back from acting. It was Scorsese who pulled him back in. He knew Pesci wasn't just acting Italian-American toughness, he was from that world. He'd seen it, lived around it. The cadence, the slang, the quiet menace. It wasn't performance, it was memory. But even then, Tommy DeVito, Pesci's character, was based on a real man named Tommy DeSimone. And the real DeSimone was nothing like Pesci physically. DeSimone was a tall, muscular brute. Pesci, short and wiry, looked nothing like him. Scorsese didn't care. He wasn't casting for height. He was casting for rage, for volatility. And in Pesci, he found it. Lorraine Bracco's path was equally unexpected. She wasn't the first choice for Karen Hill. Several actresses passed, and Bracco herself almost did too. She was afraid of being typecast, of being the mob wife, but she met with Scorsese, who promised her more than just a sidekick role. He wanted Karen to be a window into the story, a mirror of Henry's seduction and descent. Bracco agreed, and what she brought wasn't just authenticity, it was command. Her scenes often burned with the quiet power of a woman both complicit and trapped. And then came Paul Sorvino, cast as Paulie Cicero, the soft-spoken but intimidating boss. Weeks before shooting, Sorvino wanted to quit. He didn't think he could play that kind of man. It wasn't until he looked in the mirror one night, stared into his own face, and saw the menace, the stillness, that he realized he had it in him. So the cast came together, not as stars but as truth-tellers, each bringing their own piece of history, of fear, of instinct. And the result was a chemistry so real, so lived in, that audiences never even questioned it. Improvisation and real life that hinted at more. Goodfellas was built on a foundation of truth, but it was the cast who lit the match. Take the funny how scene. It wasn't just an iconic moment. It was real. Joe Pesci told Scorsese that years earlier, when he was a teenager working in a restaurant, he'd once told a mobster that he was funny. The man didn't laugh. He stared, and for a moment, Pesci thought he was going to die. That tension, that sickly panic you feel in the scene, it came from a real place. When they filmed it, Scorsese didn't script it out. He just told the actors, go with it, react, let it live. Ray Liotta had no idea where Pesci was going with it. His laughter turning to fear, that wasn't acting, that was instinct. And it's that raw, jittery authenticity that made the scene unforgettable. But that wasn't the only time real life snuck in. There's the dinner scene at Tommy's mother's house, right after they've killed Billy Batts. The three men sit around the table, blood on their hands, eating pasta like it's Sunday afternoon. That entire scene was largely improvised, except for one thing: the painting. That eerie little painting Tommy's mother pulls out, the one of the man and the two dogs in the boat. That was Joe Pesci's idea. It was based on a real photo he'd seen, and he brought it in to add a surreal touch of character. Scorsese ran with it. His own mother, Catherine Scorsese, played Tommy's mother in the scene. She cooked the food. She improvised her lines. She was just being herself, talking, laughing, doting. And that made the moment chilling, because it reminded the audience even killers have mothers who love them. Improvisation was everywhere in the film. Scorsese didn't give his cast a traditional script. He gave them freedom. Weeks before filming, he workshopped scenes with them, letting them try different versions, different deliveries. They'd rehearse a dozen different ways to say one line, then pick the most human version. Lorraine Bracco, for instance, brought so much of her own nervous energy to the role of Karen that Scorsese encouraged her to go off script. When Karen points a gun at Henry while crying, that wasn't choreographed. She was improvising how a woman in her position might actually act. Terrified, furious, desperate. Even the rhythm of the film, the speed, the chaos, the sudden bursts of silence was shaped by the cast's improvisation. Their energy dictated the editing. Their pauses became beats in the music. Every moment in Goodfellas that feels a little too real, a little too raw. That's not a coincidence. That's the cast bleeding pieces of their own truth into the fabric of fiction. And the result wasn't just a great performance. It was a mirror, a warning, a heartbeat. Real, Henry Hill, and cast interactions. Behind every line in Goodfellas is a real person. Not just inspired by, literally real. Henry Hill wasn't a character. He was a man who walked the streets of New York, made deals, moved drugs, and lived on the edge of death for decades. And by the time the movie was in production, he was still alive, just under witness protection. So, how much of him made it into Ray Liotta's performance? More than most people know, but in the most unexpected way. Liotta never met Henry Hill during filming. Not once. Scorsese didn't want the movie to feel like a documentary. He wanted the actors to bring their version of these people to life, not copy them. So instead of spending hours shadowing Hill, Liotta dove into hours of FBI tapes, court transcripts, and interviews. He absorbed Hill's voice, his rhythms, his contradictions. The charm mixed with panic, the bravado hiding the fear. Liotta later said he listened to hours of Hill speaking, not to mimic him, but to understand him, to find the thread between a kid growing up in a poor neighborhood who just wanted to belong and the man who would burn his whole world down trying to hold on to that sense of belonging. De Niro, on the other hand, did make contact. Jimmy Conway, based on real-life mobster Jimmy Burke, was still a deeply feared name in the underworld. De Niro wanted to get it right. He reportedly called Hill several times during filming to ask detailed questions. How did Jimmy hold his cigarette? What kind of sauce did he like with his pasta? Tiny details. Trivial, maybe. But for De Niro, those were the fingerprints of a man's soul. It wasn't about imitation. It was about embodiment. Joe Pesci didn't consult with anyone. He didn't have to. Tommy DeSimone, the real man behind Tommy DeVito, was already a ghost in Pesci's world. His reputation was legendary. Violent, unpredictable, terrifying. And Pesci, who had grown up around similar men, knew exactly how to channel that chaos. Lorraine Bracco chose to stay away from Karen Hill entirely. Not because she didn't care, but because she didn't want to be influenced. She wanted to show Karen from the inside out, to understand what it felt like to be seduced by power, then suffocated by it, to love a man who lies with every breath, to enjoy the diamonds and dread the nights. And yet, even without face-to-face meetings, the cast managed to capture something deeply true. Because later, when Henry Hill finally saw the film, he was stunned, not just by the story, but by the details, the tics, the tone, the way Liotta laughed, the way De Niro's Jimmy folded money, the way Pesci turned from charm to violence in a blink. It was like watching a dream of his own life. A dream filled with blood. Hidden details most fans miss. Watch Goodfellas enough times and it starts to feel like you're in it. The rhythm, the noise, the colors, it's like walking through a memory you never had. But buried inside that memory are details so subtle, so deliberately placed. Most fans never notice them. Like the painting in Tommy's mother's house. You remember the man in the boat flanked by two dogs? It's a weird little moment, right in the middle of a murder cover-up. But here's what most viewers don't realize. It's a metaphor. The man in the painting looks in one direction, while the two dogs look in another. Joe Pesci's character points this out in the scene almost offhandedly. But what he's really describing is them Henry, Jimmy, and Tommy. Three men together, all going in different directions. It's a quiet nod to how their paths will diverge, how betrayal is already in motion. And that's just the beginning. In nearly every frame, Scorsese and his team planted details that mirrored the characters' fates. Look closely at the camera work in the early scenes. Smooth, elegant, confident. It glides through clubs and kitchens like Henry himself, high on power. But as the film goes on, the camera becomes more jittery, handheld, chaotic. By the time Henry is paranoid and spiraling, the camera is practically nervous, mirroring his collapse. Even the costumes tell a story. As the characters move deeper into crime, their suits become flashier, louder. But the louder they get, the more unstable they become. Henry's final scenes, sweating, wide-eyed in a bathrobe, feel like a funeral for the man he used to be. Then there's the soundtrack. Every song is a timestamp, not just of the era, but of Henry's mood. Early on, it's all doo-wop and swing, reflecting the romantic pull of the lifestyle. But by the time the cocaine kicks in, we're into the nervous pulse of Jump Into the Fire and Monkey Man. The music doesn't just accompany the story, it's telling it under the surface. Some fans have even pointed out the changing color palette. The film starts warm, golden lights, rich reds, dark wood interiors. It feels inviting. But by the end, everything is washed out, gray, cold, sterile. Henry's world is gone, and the film wants you to feel it, even if you don't consciously notice. One final detail. The final shot of Joe Pesci firing a gun at the screen, breaking the fourth wall. It's a nod to The Great Train Robbery, 1903, one of the earliest films in cinema history. But it's also a quiet confession. You've been watching this world like a voyeur. Now it's watching you back. Every frame of Goodfellas is layered with intention, from food to fabric, from light to line delivery. And once you begin to see those layers, you realize the film isn't just telling you a story, it's warning you. About seduction, about loyalty, about how fast everything can fall apart. Challenges and what could have been different. The making of Goodfellas wasn't as smooth as its final cut suggests. Behind the camera, tensions brewed. Creative risks, studio pushback, and casting doubts nearly derailed it all. Marty Scorsese, despite his clout, had to fight for control. Warner Brothers liked the script but didn't trust the tone. Too fast, too brutal, too much voiceover. Studio executives worried it wouldn't translate. After all, it wasn't a traditional gangster film with a moral arc. It was messy, cynical, and narrated by a man who never really learned anything. One of the biggest clashes? The editing style. Scorsese and editor Thelma Schoonmaker were cutting fast, jarring transitions, overlapping voiceovers with music and jump cuts. Executives were baffled. "Where's the structure?" one reportedly asked. But Scorsese insisted, this isn't about structure, it's about immersion. The final result, what we now call a masterpiece, was almost trimmed and flattened by corporate nervousness. Then came the casting fears. Ray Liotta's name, as mentioned earlier, didn't carry much weight with the suits. They wanted bankable, but Scorsese stood firm. He didn't want fame, he wanted hunger. He wanted actors who could lose themselves in the roles, not distract from them. Joe Pesci was another risk. Studio execs wanted someone more recognizable, even for a supporting role. But Scorsese and De Niro knew Pesci had lightning inside him. They just had to let him explode. There were scenes that came close to being cut entirely. The funny how moment, as iconic as it is now, was so different from the rest of the script, some worried it would break the pacing. The dinner scene at Tommy's mother's house? Too long, they said. Too strange, but Scorsese fought to keep them, because they weren't about plot. They were about texture, about getting inside the world, not just telling us about it. Even the now iconic Copacabana tracking shot, the one that follows Henry and Karen through the back entrance of the club, was a gamble. It wasn't planned that way. The crew had issues getting the front entrance lit and coordinated, so Scorsese improvised. They'd go around the back. He choreographed the whole thing in one unbroken take. It was risky. If anyone messed up, they had to reset everything. But what came out of it was magic. That shot now stands as one of the most revered in film history. And what could have been different? Well, Tom Cruise as Henry Hill was seriously floated early on. Al Pacino as Jimmy Conway, and he later regretted saying no. Madonna was reportedly interested in Karen Hill, and John Malkovich was once considered for Pauly Cicero. Each of those casting choices would have changed the DNA of the film entirely. Not necessarily for worse, but definitely for different. Less grounded, less intimate, less real, but in the end, Scorsese chose gut over gloss. He cast for feeling, for texture, for actors who could live inside the scene instead of acting above it. And because of that, Goodfellas became something rare. A film that doesn't just show you a world, it traps you inside one. This is how these revelations change our view of the cast. Once you know what went on behind the scenes, who these actors really were, how they fought for their roles, how they brought themselves into each breath, you start to realize something. These weren't just performances. They were personal. Ray Liotta wasn't playing Henry Hill. He became a man on the edge, equal parts seduced and suffocated by the life. Now that we know he never met Henry Hill face to face, his performance becomes even more uncanny. He wasn't imitating. He was interpreting, channeling the anxiety, the charm, the slow-motion collapse of a man who wanted to matter, even if it killed him. Joe Pesci? His performance as Tommy DeVito isn't just memorable, it's dangerously alive. Knowing now that Pesci based the funny how scene on a real moment of fear he once experienced as a teenager changes everything. You're no longer watching an actor perform rage, you're watching a man revisit trauma. Pesci poured his own history into every violent outburst, every wild-eyed laugh. It's why the character feels so unpredictable, because to some extent he was. Robert De Niro was always a method actor, but in Goodfellas he did something quieter, more cerebral. His constant phone calls to Henry Hill weren't about getting lines right. They were about getting the man right. When you watch Jimmy Conway carefully hand over a stack of money or glance at someone with cold calculation, you're seeing the result of 1,000 tiny details De Niro collected. Posture, silence, how long someone waits before speaking. Lorraine Bracco, meanwhile, found something deeply powerful in Karen Hill. She resisted the cliches of the mob wife and instead showed us a woman unraveling in her own right. Her decision to stay away from the real Karen meant she built Karen from the inside. Her seduction, her dread, her complicity, it all feels lived. And when she cries or rages or whispers threats through clenched teeth, it doesn't feel like acting. It feels like confession. Paul Sorvino, who nearly walked away from the film because he didn't think he could be intimidating enough, discovered something in himself that stunned even him. That calm menace, that silent authority, it wasn't in the script. It was in him. When he saw it in the mirror, he stayed and gave us a Pauly Cicero that audiences still fear. What all this reveals is simple but profound. The power of Goodfellas doesn't come from flashy performances. It comes from the invisible, the instincts, the lived-in truths, the wounds and memories the actors brought with them buried beneath every laugh, every line, every bullet. These weren't characters. They were people. And the more we learn about the cast, their doubts, their improvisations, their quiet rebellions, the more we understand why the film still haunts us. Because when they acted, they were telling us who they really were. The revelation. So here it is, the moment most fans never saw coming. Joe Pesci won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his role as Tommy DeVito. He famously said only 6 words in his acceptance speech: "It's my privilege." Thank you. But what no one knew at the time, what even some of his co-stars didn't fully understand, was that Pesci had no intention of ever playing a role like that again. After Goodfellas, Pesci quietly walked away from the kind of violence and volatility that made him a legend. Not because he couldn't do it again, but because he didn't want to. Behind the scenes, the role had taken a toll. Tommy DeVito wasn't just scary to the audience. He was scary to the man playing him. That rage, that unpredictability, it stayed with him long after the cameras stopped rolling. The truth is, Joe Pesci hated violence. He hated what it did to people, and the more audiences cheered for Tommy, the more they quoted his lines and laughed at his outbursts, the more uncomfortable Pesci became. Because they missed the point. Tommy wasn't cool. He was broken, dangerous, tragic. And Pesci knew, if he kept playing characters like that, people would keep celebrating that kind of man instead of fearing him. That's why, when Scorsese came back years later with Casino, Pesci agreed to play Nicky Santoro. But it would be the last time. After that, he stepped back. Rare interviews, fewer roles, a quiet retreat from the spotlight. Because the real revelation, the one buried beneath the surface of Goodfellas, is that the very thing we find most thrilling about the film was what its cast, especially Pesci, found most haunting. It wasn't a story about gangsters. It was a story about addiction, to power, to fear, to control. And the actors knew, if you get too close to that world, it starts to look normal, even fun, until it isn't. So the greatest twist in Goodfellas isn't in the plot. It's in the legacy. The most celebrated gangster film of all time is, at its core, a warning told by people who touched darkness and chose to walk away from it. The wrap-up. In the end, Goodfellas wasn't just a film. It was a reckoning. It showed us a world seductively lit with neon signs, Sinatra crooning, and the glint of gold chains. But underneath, it was about rot, about the slow, sweet corrosion of men who wanted everything: respect, money, fear, and lost themselves trying to keep it. And the cast. They didn't just act it, they revealed it. Through instinct, improvisation, and sheer nerve, they blurred the line between fiction and truth until we couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Ray Liotta, now forever linked to Henry Hill, carried the weight of that role long after the credits rolled. His career was shaped by it. So was his legacy. And when he passed in 2022, fans didn't just mourn the actor, they mourned the soul of Goodfellas. Joe Pesci, the wild heart of the film, vanished from that world by choice. And maybe, in doing so, he gave us the film's final lesson, that playing monsters can cost you pieces of yourself. That violence, even when it's fake, leaves behind echoes. Robert De Niro kept mining those depths, each character more precise, more internal, more studied. But Jimmy Conway still stands apart. Because in Goodfellas, De Niro didn't perform for us. He led us into something. Lorraine Bracco gave us a woman's view of the mob, a rarity in cinema, and did it with fire and vulnerability that still stings to watch. Her scenes weren't just about Karen. They were about anyone who's ever loved something that's killing them. And Scorsese, he didn't just make a mob movie, he painted a portrait of decay, one that only works because his cast bled truth into every brushstroke. What they left behind wasn't just a film. It was a time capsule of lived moments, unscripted fear, and performances that felt like confessions. So the next time you watch Goodfellas, look closer at the glance Jimmy gives across the bar, at the twitch in Henry's eye, at the tremble in Karen's voice. These aren't choices made in a script. They're ghosts. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Because Goodfellas wasn't acted, it was inhabited. And what the cast revealed, quietly, privately, sometimes decades later, is that the most dangerous thing about that world is how easy it is to feel at home there. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment down below as it helps support this channel. Also, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our newest videos. Thanks for watching.